This episode answers the question of how many homes do the royal family own? And how many do you know? Yes, there are the obvious ones like Buckingham Palace, Kensington Palace, and of course, Balmoral Castle. However, there are a number of lesser known residences throughout the United Kingdom and the world that even the most loyal royal followers may not be aware of. Plus, the royal family has a Montague house, or should I say a castle, that had been in our family for over 300 years until it was sold in the 1900s to the royal family. In fact, it was acquired by Queen Elizabeth II's uncle, and as of 3 days ago when I'm filming this, it's now for sale. I'm thinking we need to get this castle back in the family. Maybe not, but lots more on that house, aka castle, later in the video. So what are the 30 plus regal estates that the royal family has called home? Well, let's start with the most well-known and visited of all the royal properties, Buckingham Palace. Buckingham Palace has remained the official London residence of the British monarchs since 1837. Designed in a neoclassical style, the palace has a total of 775 rooms, which includes 188 staff bedrooms, 92 offices, 78 bathrooms, 52 royal and guest bedrooms, and 19 staterooms. That's an almighty palace, isn't it? So the next palace, number 2, Kensington Palace. It's the birthplace and childhood home of Queen Victoria. Kensington Palace has 547 rooms and is the London home and office to a number of royals, including Prince and Princess of Wales, William and Catherine. From the middle of 2017 up until their move to Windsor, apartment 1A had been the main residence for the Prince and Princess of Wales, which has 4 floors and 20 rooms. Kensington Palace was also the former home of Princess Diana, as well as Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. Number 3, another palace, St. James's Palace. This London palace was the former residence of the monarchs of England until the reign of Queen Victoria. St. James's Palace holds an important role in the monarchy as it's the place where the Garter King of Arms formally announces the accession of the new king or queen from the palace's proclamation gallery after the death of a monarch. And we recently saw this with the accession of King Charles III after the death of Queen Elizabeth II. It's also the London residence of Princess Anne, Princess Beatrice, and Princess Alexandra. The palace even hosts charity receptions associated with members of the royal family. Number 4, Clarence House. King Charles III and Queen Consort Camilla resided here, using it as their official London residence before his accession. Built in 1825 and 1827, Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip lived in the townhouse after their marriage in 1947. It was also the London home of the Queen Mother from 1953 until 2002. Number 5, 6, and 7, Ivy Cottage, Wren House, and Nottingham Cottage. There are smaller properties on the grounds of Kensington Palace, Ivy Cottage, Wren House, and Nottingham Cottage, which have been popular homes in the royal family for years. Nottingham Cottage was the former home of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle before they moved to Frogmore Cottage. Ivy Cottage is currently the first home of Princess Eugenie and her husband, Jack Brooksbank. Prince Edward, the Duke of Kent, lives at Wren House with his wife, Catherine Worsley. Let's get on to number 8 now, Windsor Castle. For over 900 years, the Crown-owned Windsor Castle has acted as both a private home and an official residence for the United Kingdom's monarchs. Inside the property is the famous St. George's Chapel, the location where Prince Harry and Meghan Markle married in May 2018, and Princess Eugenie and Jack Brooksbank married in October 2018. And recently, the royal burials of His Royal Highness Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, and Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, now interred in the King George VI Memorial Chapel. Fort Belvedere. A part of the Windsor estate, Fort Belvedere was built in the Gothic Revival style by English architect Geoffrey Wyatville in the 1820s. Most famously, the manor house served as the royal residence for Edward VIII. Yep, him, the Duke of Windsor, between 1929 and 1936. And during his stay, the then prince renovated many of the rooms to include more contemporary details and added horse stables, a swimming pool, and tennis courts. But it was there that Edward signed his written abdication notice, stripping him from his royal title and his home. Frogmore House. Frogmore House has been a Crown-owned official residence since 1792. Originally bought by George III as a gift for his wife, Queen Charlotte, Frogmore House has remained in the royal family ever since. While the house has been unoccupied since 1872, the royal family often hosts private and official events at the residence. Most recently, the location of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's evening wedding reception. And right behind Frogmore House, Frogmore Cottage, the former home of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. Frogmore Cottage shares the same grounds as Frogmore House. The cottage was built in 1801 under the direction of Queen Charlotte, the Royal Lodge. 3 miles south of Windsor Castle, the Royal Lodge was the longtime country home of King George VI, and as we like to call her, the Queen Mother. The Queen Mother continued to use the lodge as one of her country retreats until her death in 2002. Andrew moved into the 30-room home in 2004 and continues to live there with his ex-wife, Sarah Ferguson. And now we're on to Balmoral Castle. Located in Aberdeenshire, Scotland, Balmoral Castle served as Queen Elizabeth's second home and sits on 50,000 acres with 150 buildings. Queen Victoria and Prince Albert originally purchased the castle in 1852, and it's remained one of the royal family's favorite vacation spots. And of course, it was where Queen Elizabeth II spent her final days. Birk Hall. A part of the Balmoral Castle estate, Birk Hall was bought by Queen Victoria for her son Edward, Prince of Wales, in 1849. Birk Hall was also the former home of the Queen Mother. Craiggwen Lodge. Technically on the grounds of the Balmoral estate, Craiggwen Lodge is about a mile from Balmoral Castle and is a lovely rustic stone cottage. The then Prince Charles and Princess Diana would often stay in the 7-bedroom house during their visits to the Balmoral estate. Let's get on to another palace, shall we? Hampton Court Palace. The former seat of the Tudor dynasty dates back to 1514, when they started laying the foundation for this marvelous palace. When King William III and Queen Mary II took to the throne, they appointed Sir Christopher Wren to expand the palace and landscape architect Capability Brown to tend to the gardens. The palace and its grounds were opened to the public as a museum in 1838 by Queen Victoria and have operated under the Crown ever since. Sandringham House. This 19,000-acre estate is a private residence of the royal family in Norfolk, England. Queen Elizabeth II inherited the property from her family in 1952, and Prince Philip took charge of the home's management and upkeep. The royal family usually celebrates Christmas at Sandringham and attends the church service at the Church of St. Mary Magdalene, which is located on the grounds. And here we come to the Montague connection, Barnwell Manor and Castle. Here it is, drum roll everybody. In 1540, King Henry VII gifted Barnwell to the Montague family, our family, for being loyal supporters of the crown. And it remained with us until the early 1900s, when a series of tenants stayed at the Elizabethan Manor House in Northamptonshire for short periods. It would come back into the ownership of the royal family in 1938, when Prince Henry, Duke of Gloucester, Queen Elizabeth II's uncle, bought the estate. The rambling stone manor house at the heart of the property was built according to its listing for the Montague family in the late 16th or early 17th century, and then altered or extended in the mid-18th century. And guess what? It's up for sale. Yes, it is for sale, but offers are in excess of $4.75 million. We won't be able to get that back. Moving on, the Castle of May. As depicted in the first season of The Crown, the Queen Mother purchased deteriorating Barrowgill Castle in 1952 after seeing it on one of her visits. It required extensive renovations of the castle and gardens, and a decision was made to restore it to its original name, the Castle of May. Today, the property is under the stewardship of the Prince's Foundation. The Old Royal Palace of Hatfield. The original structure on the grounds of the now Hollywood-famous Hatfield House, the Royal Palace of Hatfield, was the childhood home and some say the favorite residence of Queen Elizabeth I. After the accession of King James I to the throne, he decided to give the palace to Elizabeth's chief minister, Robert Cecil, 1st Earl of Salisbury, who built the astonishing Jacobean home that is now on the property. However, only a small part of the original palace still remains on the grounds. Dumfries House. Dumfries House dates back to 1754. It's a Palladian-style home with lavish interiors filled with Chippendale furniture. Regarded as one of the most significant royal properties, shockwaves ran through Great Britain when news hit it was on the verge of sale, propelling the then Prince Charles and one of his foundations to raise funds to save Dumfries. Today, the stately home is open for people to explore its original 18th century furnishings and incredible interiors. Thatched House Lodge. I love this one. Originally built for the garden keepers of Richmond Park, the Thatched House Lodge served as a residence for the royal household until 1927. High political figures, such as President Dwight D. Eisenhower, stayed in the 6-bedroom home, but eventually it would become the permanent residence of Sir Angus Ogilvy and Princess Alexandra in 1963. This next one, I'm not going to pronounce it apart from Little Cottage, but you can see it on the screen. It was gifted to the then Princess Elizabeth by the Welsh people in 1932. The miniature thatched cottage has remained on the same grounds as the Royal Lodge since then, serving as the official royal playhouse for generations. Dolphin House. 28 miles from the Cornish coast is Dolphin House on the island of Tresco, which many members of the royal family flock to for a vacation. And it's also owned by the family. Hidden behind a walled garden, the former rectory offers astonishing views of Round Island Lighthouse from each of its 6 bedrooms. But the best part, you can rent out this idyllic house all to yourself. All right, Anmer Hall. I think we've all heard of Anmer Hall. It was gifted to Prince William and Catherine Middleton by Queen Elizabeth after their wedding. The 10-bedroom Georgian home is located on the Sandringham estate. The now Prince and Princess of Wales lived in the country house full-time until they moved to Kensington Palace. The Palace of Holyrood House, the official Crown-owned residence in Scotland, began as a monastery in 1128. The palace is open to the public year-round, and you can visit the Holyrood Abbey, the palace gardens, and the state apartments. After the death of Queen Elizabeth II, she traveled from Balmoral Castle to her official Scottish residence, Holyrood House. Hillsborough Castle. This is the official Northern Ireland residence of the monarchy and Secretary of State for Northern Ireland. Other members of the British royal family also stay at the castle when they visit the country. Highgrove House, the private family home of King Charles III and Queen Consort Camilla. It's most famous for its beautiful gardens, which members of the public can tour on select dates throughout the year. It was bought in 1980 and was initially used as a weekend home for the then Prince of Wales and Princess Diana after the marriage in 1981. On the screen is the Welsh home of King Charles. King Charles III and Queen Consort Camilla often stay here at the property in the summer during their annual tour of Wales. The 215-acre estate features energy-efficient appliances, low-energy lighting, and natural sheep's wool insulation. Gatcombe Park is the residence of Princess Anne and her husband, Sir Timothy Lawrence. The country house and farm is located in Gloucester and were purchased by Queen Elizabeth in 1976 for Anne. Princess Anne's daughter, Zara Tyndall, moved her family to the estate in 2013. And last, but certainly not least, is Bagshot Park. This 57-room royal residence is the current Surrey home of Prince Edward and Sophie, Countess of Wessex. The property was owned by Queen Victoria's third son, Prince Arthur, after its reconstruction in 1879. The 5 worst British monarchs, and I'm afraid that one is because of our family. There have been 62 monarchs of England and Britain spread over a period of approximately 1,200 years. First up is Henry VIII. I bet you guessed that. The best known fact about Henry VIII is that he had 6 wives. And most school children learn the following rhyme to help them remember the fate of each wife. Divorced, beheaded, died. Divorced, beheaded, survived. His first wife was Catherine of Aragon, his brother's widow. But he was always cheating on Catherine with various mistresses. And to make matters worse, the queen was unable to provide her husband with a male heir. She only gave birth to one daughter who grew up to be Mary I. He later divorced Catherine of Aragon to marry Anne Boleyn. This divorce caused the split from Rome, and Henry declared himself the head of the Church of England. The dissolution of the monasteries began in 1536, and the money gained from this helped Henry to bring about an effective navy. Do check out my video on American Countess, where I visit the ruins of Beaulieu Abbey, which was demolished by King Henry VIII. Without any solid evidence to support his claims, Henry accused his wife, Anne Boleyn, of adultery, and she was beheaded in May 1536. In an effort to have a son, Henry married 4 further wives, but only one son was born to Jane Seymour, but she died shortly after giving birth. Hungry for more male heirs, Henry agreed to marry Anne of Cleves, but he annulled the marriage after 6 months because he didn't think Anne was attractive enough. Despite his less than ideal appearance, Henry married for a 6th and final time in the summer of 1543. Catherine Parr, though, didn't provide Henry with any more sons, leaving him with just one male heir, Edward VI. And his 2 daughters also became rulers of England: Mary, daughter of Catherine Aragon, and Elizabeth, daughter of Anne Boleyn. Well, clearly King Henry VIII was not very healthy. Number 2. Mary I, aka Bloody Mary, daughter of Henry VIII and Catherine of Aragon. A devout Catholic, she married Philip of Spain. Mary attempted to enforce the conversion of England to Catholicism. She carried this out with the utmost of severity. Indeed, groups of Protestants were regularly burned in front of large crowds. By the end of her 5-year reign, 300 Protestants had been burned alive. I mean, it's just awful to think about that. The Protestant bishops Latimer, Ridley, and Archbishop Cranmer were among those burnt at the stake. Catholicism soon became synonymous with brutality and immortality. The country was plunged into a bitter bloodbath, which is why she's remembered as Bloody Mary. Number 3, Charles II. Now, some of you might disagree with me, but I'm gonna stick to my guns on this one. Son of Charles I, Charles II was also known as the Merry Monarch for his lifting of Puritan restrictions on entertainment and his own love of pleasure. Charles I was executed in 1649. Therefore, Charles II spent the next 9 years in exile, until in 1660, he was invited back to London and restored to his father's throne. And who went to bring him back from exile and put him on the throne? Our ancestor, Edward Montagu, the 1st Earl of Sandwich. When Parliament resolved to proclaim King Charles II to the throne and invited him to return to England, Montagu commanded the fleet that brought him from the Dutch Republic on the 24th of May. 2 months later, on the 12th of July, 1660, he was created Baron Montague of St. Neots, Viscount Hinchingbroke, and Earl of Sandwich. King Charles also made him a Knight of the Garter. But although very popular, he was a weak king and his foreign policy was inept. He had 13 known mistresses, one of whom was Nell Gwyn. He fathered numerous illegitimate children, but no heir to the throne. The Great Plague in 1665 and the Great Fire of London in 1666 took place during his reign. Many new buildings were built at this time. St. Paul's Cathedral was built by Sir Christopher Wren, and also many churches still to be seen today. But that doesn't make him a good king. Here we are, George IV, and he's number 4. Known as the first gentleman of Europe, he had a love of art and architecture, but his private life was a mess, to put it mildly. George IV spent his days pursuing one thing: pleasure, and dare I say, addictions. He developed a lust for drinking, eating, gambling, and sexual exploits. He married twice, once in 1785 to Mrs. Fitzherbert, secretly, as she was a Catholic, and then in 1795 to Caroline of Brunswick. His social life led to an enormous amount of debt, which Parliament had to pay for, and he had many illegitimate children with his mistresses. Though George had a string of lovers throughout his lifetime, he was a sad, lonely, overweight king by the end of his reign. However, Caroline and George did have one daughter, Charlotte, in 1796, but she sadly died in 1817. George finally became King of Great Britain and Ireland in 1820, but died in 1830 and was succeeded by his younger brother, William IV. And last but not least, let me know if you guessed this, Edward VIII, who abdicated December 1936. Edward was the most popular Prince of Wales Britain has ever had. Like George IV, though, Edward VIII liked to misbehave. He was a rebel and had little interest in politics. The prince also embarked on a series of love affairs, and he was in his own right a flirt, and developed a taste for older married women. In 1931, he met Wallis Simpson, an American socialite who had just married for the second time. The two of them became closer and closer as time went on, and by 1935, Edward wanted to marry Wallis. After the death of George V, his father, in 1936, Edward became King of the United Kingdom, and he had every intention of marrying Wallis. But this potential marriage was frowned upon by the government, and in particular, the Church of England. They didn't want the king to marry a divorced woman whose previous husbands were still alive. Simply put, Mrs. Simpson was an American, a divorcee who had 2 husbands still living, not going to work. Edward had stated that he wanted her to be crowned with him at the coronation, which was to take place the following May. But that proved to be impossible. So Edward abdicated in December 1936, less than a year after becoming king. His brother, George VI, was forced to take the crown. And in the end, Edward did marry Wallis the following summer. Also, just a side note here, in October 1937, Edward and Wallis traveled to Nazi Germany, where he was photographed alongside Adolf Hitler, and even performed the Nazi salute on several occasions. After the Second World War, the Allies discovered documents which outlined the Nazis' intention to restore Edward to the throne as the head of a fascist Britain. Due to Edward's connection with the Nazis, many historians argue and agree that his abdication was actually a blessing in disguise. If he had remained king, the British monarchy would have been completely tainted. So perhaps we should all be grateful to Wallis Simpson as well. Comment down below. We are going to be discussing coat of arms, heraldry, the crest, and really what all those different elements mean. And in fact, Further on in the video, I'm going to be showing you, right behind that chair right there, our Montague sandwich coat of arms. A little bit of background around that is that the family that I married into, yes, of course, invented the sandwich. That was the 4th Earl of Sandwich, but it was the 1st Earl of Sandwich, Edward Montague, who obtained the title Earl of Sandwich from Charles II. How did he get that title? How did these coat of arms come to be? Further on in the video, once I show them to you, I think it's going to make a lot more sense. So be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Definitely like this video if you do like it. So let's get started. What is the difference between coat of arms? What is heraldry? How do you distinguish the crest? It's all very confusing, but I'm going to unpack it for you and make it very simple. And you might even win the next trivia night or quiz night wherever you are. Let's get started. I have such an interest in these coat of arms, and not just because I married into a family that has a coat of arms. I travel all across the UK, and I'm able and lucky enough to visit some of Britain's most spectacular historic houses. And I've seen the fabric of these buildings are plastered with coat of arms, not only on the exterior, but carvings on the inside as well as stained glass. And that's because, you know, back in the day, that's when they really wanted to show off their power and their wealth and their success, and of course, their achievements. That's why you'll see these coat of arms all over these incredible historic houses. So how did it all begin? Well, it began a long, long time ago. A man in full armor was unrecognizable. Is he on my side or is he on their side? So each man wore a distinctive coat so that he could be recognized over his armor. Subsequently, it was called his coat of arms. These arms were then displayed on his banner, his horse cloth, his shield, and of course, his coat. And then this coat came to be worn in his civil life too. But, and this is a big but, no two men in the same region could wear exactly the same coat of arms. So what did they do? They began to differentiate themselves from one another with personal symbols, especially to mark their possessions, because few people could read in those days. And then this coat of arms was then usually depicted on a shield. But we've got a whole lot more to go through here. What about all the other elements in a coat of arms? The crest, for example. The crest is not the same as a coat of arms, which I'll tell you a little bit more about later. But what is the crest? Soon thereafter, though, a personal crest of light wood or even boiled leather was put on top of the helmet. So a crest, I always think of the crest as like the prominent tuft of feathers of the crown of a bird's head, but it's a little bit different than that. But it is usually an animal. Below the crest is a silken mantle, which is a loose, sleeveless cloak or shawl that's hung down to keep the heat of the sun off the back of the armor. The mantling was then kept in place by a wreath of twisted silk, although here's where we see the coronets come into play. Some great men wore a chapeau or a hat, or again, the crest coronet instead of the wreath. Usually the helmet, and in our case, the Montague sandwich coat of arms, we do have the Earl's coronet. The crest and the mantling are usually depicted above the shield, but not always. The mantling can also be found below the shield as well. With the addition of a motto for many quote-unquote great men on a scroll, as they really sort of formed the achievement above an ordinary gentleman. Thus, they had their personal motto on that scroll. I'm going to show you our motto in a second, and I'll try to read it in Latin as well. But now we come to the supporters who are really on either side of the shield. Certain prominent men, like our ancestor, Edward Montague, the 1st Earl of Sandwich, were allowed to depict their shields held up by supporters, which then stand on a mound called a compartment. So the full achievement or coat of arms of a peer, like our family, is made up of his coat of arms, his chapeau, coronet, the helmet, the crest, the mantling, the motto, supporters, and compartment. Now, a question I get asked all the time is, do coat of arms belong to just a surname? Well, the answer is no. There's no such thing as a coat of arms for a surname or a last name. Coat of arms are inherited in the male line, and so are surnames. But a coat of arms is granted or really confirmed to one person and their descendants in the legitimate male line. So only that family group will be entitled to that coat of arms, not everybody of that surname. So as such, many people of the same surname will often be entitled to completely different coat of arms, and many others of that surname won't have a coat of arms at all. But hear me out. You'll be able to get one if you want to. Stay to the end of this video. But again, for any person to have a right to a coat of arms, they must either have had it granted to them or been descended in the legitimate male line from a person to whom arms were granted or confirmed in the past. Our coat of arms was granted to us by King Charles II. Second frequently asked question is, what is a crest though really? What's the difference between a crest and coat of arms? And there's a popular misconception that a crest describes the coat of arms, but in fact, it's just really, as we discussed, it's just a specific part of the full achievement of the coat of arms. So, and it's usually that object that's placed on top of the helm. So let's have a little look at the Montague coat of arms. So we're looking at the Montague coat of arms, and you can see right here at the top, we have the crest. So we do have the crest, which is a bird. Underneath there is the mantle. Now, sometimes you'll see the mantle in coat of arms that it's, hanging down or hanging around or twisted around or even twisted at the bottom. But here our mantle is rolled up. Then, of course, you have the coronet, and this is the Earl's coronet, and you can decipher that by the amount of baubles here, and there are 5 balls on top. And underneath is really the chapeau. So if you did have a coat of arms where you do have a coronet, so again, that can be a duke, it can be an earl, but underneath is where the chapeau would go. Chapeau is like a hat, and there is the brim of the chapeau. So if you did have a coronet, you're most likely to put the chapeau underneath the coronet. And then on either side, we have the 2 supporters of this, really the Montague sandwich coat of arms. And here we have Neptune, and he is the god of sea. And the reason that the College of Heralds, who were the ones who created, if you like, this coat of arms for Edward Montague, the 1st Earl of Sandwich, is because he was head of the Admiralty. He was the one who brought back on his ship, brought back King Charles II from exile, brought him back from Holland so that he could be crowned the next king. And of course he was. And so this represents really the strong seaman that Edward Montague was. On the either side, we have an eagle, and this eagle really dates back before Edward Montague was given his coat of arms. There were other Montagues within our family who had coat of arms prior to ours being created, and part of that was an eagle. And so you will see within the shield here, which is quartered, you can see the 2 eagles on either side, and this really represents the surname Montague, or really the family. And then, of course, we've got the Montague lozenges. And Montague in French means peak of the mountains. So you can see here the peak of the mountains. And then below, that's really the reflection of the mountains. And we have 3 of those here. And I would say that the other Montague family members who are, quite far away as far as, I don't even know how many times removed cousins, but they do have Montague coat of arms, and you will see the Montague lozenges in their shield as well, because that does represent the surname. Then down below, we have the motto, and it's on a scroll, and I'm going to read it in Latin, and it's Post Tot Naufragia Portum, which means, our motto means, after so many shipwrecks, the harbor. And that really makes sense for, in particular, Edward Montagu, the first Earl of Sandwich. He was a great, well, he was head of the Admiralty here. And then underneath, this is the compartment. It's all in one sense, resting on the compartment. And this coat of arms was made for the fourth Earl of Sandwich, who was the one who invented the famous snack that we all eat right now, the sandwich. And I can tell that because the date is 1765, and also it says the Right Honorable John Montagu, Earl of Sandwich, right here. So this is the Montagu coat of arms, and I hope that that's helped explain a little bit more about heraldry, crests, coat of arms, the different elements around it. The good news is you can get your own coat of arms. These days you can, and I always think of these coat of arms nowadays to really represent you and your family.